As I mentioned in the previous class, I speak about speech and Jewish law and Jewish ethics to do with speech, the way we speak to and about each other. A quick summary of some of the main points we spoke about last time. According to the Jewish understanding of the concept of Lashon Hara, which is where you speak badly about somebody else to a third person or to a group of people, the essence of that, according to the Jewish understanding, is actually a self-harm type of commandment, where we are told that every time you speak badly about somebody, even if they will not be harmed by it, you're harming yourself. Because what happens is you are slowly twisting your perception of the world, and you are surrounding yourself with negative people and negative concepts because that's how you view them. And the more you do that, the more unhappy you will be. Whereas if you, not in a naive way, I don't mean, I have to always mention this, I don't mean being naive and pretending that everybody is perfect. We need to be aware of dangerous people around us. But if you choose to perhaps be aware of things you need to be wary of, but if you choose to focus on the positivity in each person around you, you will start to feel happier. And I am, over the last 12, 13 years that I've been working on this, I am a much, much happier person than I ever was before I started this concept. We mentioned last time that there are two distinct types of Lashon Hara, negative speech. One is damaging Lashon Hara, where I speak about somebody to somebody else. And by doing that, I cause them physical harm, emotional suffering, or financial loss. That's the damaging side. And then there's a derogatory side. Derogatory means I'm putting them down, saying something not nice about them. So today I want to perhaps open up a little bit of an understanding of how Jewish law works in the area of evaluating what is a derogatory statement. And next time, we're going to look at the times when one can, and sometimes when one must say something negative about somebody else, perhaps for the protection of society or to help a person out. We'll talk about that next time. But just for today, I want to see if we can look at the way Jewish law works through and defines what's called a derogatory comment. Now, why is this important? I mean, I know that not everybody here, or perhaps nobody here, is Jewish. So let's first of all just put down an understanding of why this is important. We believe that Jewish law is the definition of how God wants the world to look. Now, there are some rules that are specifically, especially the more, shall we say, the more ritualistic rules that are more defined for somebody who's taken on the role of becoming a Jewish person, either through birth or through them deciding to go through a conversion process, which, as you know, is not something that we particularly encourage. We know that a person can be a great person whether they are Jewish or not, which actually makes our religion quite unique, as you probably are aware. But then there are the more, how should we say, I don't like using this word, please excuse me, but I'm going to use it anyway. The more moralistic rules, the rules about how we live together as a society. And the truth is, this applies to everybody. It's not something specifically for the Jewish people. And according to most rabbis who are involved with such things, the rules of speech really should apply to everybody. So therefore, I'm going to give you an insight as to how halacha, Jewish law, views some areas of speech, and then we'll see how we can incorporate that into our life. So we can have a whole range of different things. We can have comments that describe somebody's looks. He is ugly. More likely, she is ugly. For some reason, that seems to be an insult that is thrown out. She is fat. He is toxic. She is. All of these terms are viewed generally in society to be derogatory. I mean, when I'm doing this with my students, I will write on the board a whole list of comments and ask people, to contribute comments. One of the things I always write down is she is American. And because the vast majority of my students are from the States, I immediately get sort of, what? And sometimes I'll say, no, it should be he is British or something like that. They'll come straight back at me with a comment. And then I ask the students, when you look at this list, would you say that they're all derogatory? Are all of these statements lowering when you make the comment about the person? So I will often get people say, yes, most of them, but not the American one. One of the things you find with a lot of these comments is that actually they are subjective. What I mean by the word subjective here is that the derogatory aspect of them is actually subjective. It depends on so many different things. It will depend on the tone that is set. It will depend on the tune that's used. It may depend on the context. I'll give you an example. I agree that this is an extreme example, and I'm playing a game. But I'm playing a game on purpose just so you can see what I'm talking about here. I presume most of you at some point in your life have seen an American teen movie. Now, all American teen movies follow a similar sort of pattern, okay? There is, it takes place in an American high school. You have these very, very, very beautiful looking people, males and females, like the jocks with the muscles. They can't even put their arms next to their body because the muscles are getting in the way, right? And at the beginning of the beginning of the movie, they're making themselves known. They're sort of pushing one of the sort of what should we call them? The geeks. One of the geeks around. The books fall on the floor. We've seen all of this, and then there's this very, very beautiful queen who obviously is dating the head sports guy. You know what I'm talking about here. You've seen these sorts of things. And one of the narratives you always see in these movies is that the beautiful people are mean and horrible. Okay? And actually, it's the nerdy, ugly ones who turn out to be really beautiful. I don't mean just externally once they've had their eyebrows done and they wear contact lenses instead of glasses. I don't mean that. I mean actually beautiful inside. Are you following what I'm saying? Now let's say I have built my worldview. Just I don't recommend doing this, but let's say you have built your worldview just watching these sorts of movies, and you've come to the realization that actually beautiful people are rotten inside, and it's the ugly people who are amazing, to the extent that you love ugly people. Okay? Now, because you love ugly, please, I know this is absurd, but please work with me. Because you love ugly people so much, you've decided that you're going to start an ugly club. You call it LOUD, which stands for Lovers of Ugly Dudes. Now, anybody can come and join your club. It's fun. It's amazing. You do amazing things. It's a wonderful place to be. But there's one rule if somebody wants to join your club. They have to get a witness to come and tell you that that person is ugly. Now, when that witness tells you that that person is ugly, the one who wants to join the club, is that a derogatory comment when the witness calls the person ugly? Is it derogatory? Is it putting them down? No, of course it's not putting them down. Not just because they want to be called ugly, not just because of what they want, but because in my mind, in this world that I built here, in my mind, I view that as a positive thing. I know that this is an extreme case, but are you following the concept that I'm saying? Words are just words. I mean, Shakespeare said it the best, right? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. And essentially what he means is that words are just labels that we give for things. I mean, just as an example, if I was to say that something is cool to my father, in my father's generation, he thinks that means cold. He's got to put on an extra sweater because it's cold. For me, I mean, it's cool. If my son says wicked, right, that to me means evil. But for his generation, wicked means cool. Again, wicked actually is an evil word. And I think they've just made a movie of something to do with that, although I'm not sure what it's about. Words are just words. They are labels. They can mean anything. Now, I agree that my example is an extreme example, but let's take a different word. Let's take the word fact. Now, I think we would agree that nowadays, if you call somebody fat, unfortunately, in most cases, that is a derogatory comment. The reason why a person is calling somebody else fat is because they want to put them down in some way. But it wasn't always that way. If you go back 150, 200 years, it was a compliment to call somebody fat. That's why if you go to any of these Renaissance art museums, you will see that all of the beautiful images in these Renaissance paintings, they would all be considered clinically obese by today's standards. So the term depends. It depends on time periods. You go back 200 years ago, it was a compliment. Nowadays, it's an insult. But I agree that both the word ugly and the word fat today are clearly, at least in the society that we're part of, unfortunately, and the way those words are generally used, they are clearly insulting, lowering, derogatory comments. But let me give you an example of the type of thing that I would say is very, very subjective. I don't know how you would feel about this. You'll tell me. It may depend on the culture that you're part of. But let's say I was to say, oh, you know, so-and-so who's part of our community. I hear they're getting divorced. What is that? What's that comment? I mean, we said that Lashon Hara is, even if it's true, if it's a derogatory comment, even if it's true, it's not allowed. So is that a derogatory comment? What do you think? Really constructive reason to share that information. I agree. But let's say there is no constructive purpose whatsoever. Is there anything derogatory with me telling you that somebody's getting divorced? Often, when you pass on information like this, it can cause harm. It can cause distress, especially if the person is not ready for that information to be passed on. So I agree with that. But just looking on the derogatory side, remember we said there's two different types of Lashon Hara, and sometimes it's both. So I agree it could be harmful. But what about on the derogatory statement? When I tell you that somebody got divorced, do I mean that in a derogatory way? Do I think less of them? Am I looking down upon them? Now, how do I know it's not objectively bad? Now, when I say objectively bad, when I use the word objective, I mean how it is viewed not by humanity, but by God. How do I know that God does not look down on people who get divorced? Does anybody know? This is you need to have some knowledge here. You probably already know that there are 613 commandments in the Torah. This is a concept I'm sure. One of those commandments is to write for your wife a divorce document. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm supposed to one day turn to my wife and say, honey, we've kept the other 612. Let's complete the set. That's not what it means. It doesn't mean that. What it means is that when there is a situation, you have two people who've worked really hard to make a marriage work. They've done all of the work that they should have done, but they are holding each other back from spiritual growth and development in this world. God says it is better that these two people move their separate ways and continue their spiritual growth in this world rather than holding each other back. And in such a situation, it is a mitzvah. It is a good thing to do. Again, it's not something we are encouraging, as Matthew said. We're definitely not. We're not encouraging this at all. But there are certain circumstances where actually it's considered to be a good thing, because it's the right step forward for each of those people to grow in this world. We do not want a situation. We believe strongly in the sanctity of marriage, and that marriage is not this Hollywood you jump in and then you live happily ever after sort of thing at all. In fact, marriage is years and years and years of hard work. It's worth it. It's worth it, but you have to be putting in a tremendous amount of hard work. But yes, I agree. As the final situation where we've tried everything and we're just not working, at that point, God says it is good. It's a good thing to do, as you said, as a solution, so that we can move forward. So we're not spending the rest of our life stagnating. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because that means that it's not objectively bad. So when I say that somebody's getting a divorce, I'm not saying something that is objectively negative about them. The question is, how do the people in the conversation view it? So let me give you an insight as to what the Torah says, what Jewish law says about whether or not I can tell you that comment for no real purpose. And the answer is, I can say it if I can fulfill 4 conditions. And the first 2 are obvious. The first 2 conditions are that the speaker and the listener must not view that negatively. If the speaker views it negatively, but the listener doesn't, it doesn't matter. The speaker has communicated something that they view in a negative light. They're not allowed to do that. Or if it's the other way around, if the speaker doesn't view it negatively, but the listener is the type of person who would view that negatively, then if there's no actual constructive purpose to pass on that information, you can't, because the listener is going to hear it in a negative way. Now, you may ask me, well, how do I know? How do I know what the listener's going to think? That's a great question. Sometimes you do know, because sometimes the listener has already communicated to you in previous discussions their views on divorce or on people who have got divorced. Perhaps the listener themselves has been through a divorce, so you know that they view it in a more kindly, compassionate viewpoint rather than other people may. But if you don't know what they think, you have to view that person as a product of the society that they are part of and make assumptions based on that. Does that make sense? If divorce is something that is completely normalized and nobody looks down on anybody who's got divorced, well, if you don't look down upon them, and the listener is the type of person who comes from such a society and they are highly unlikely to think less of the people involved, well, then you haven't actually communicated anything derogatory. It's not objectively bad, because as far as God is concerned, there are times where it's the appropriate action. Nor do the people involved in this conversation view it negatively. So those are the first 2 conditions. Before I take any questions at this point, I just want to give you another example. Again, I apologize if this example comes close to the bone, but when giving examples, it actually makes sense to give examples that are close to the bone, because these are the types of things that we deal with on a more regular basis. So if I was to give the following example, can I tell you that so-and-so, we'll give him a name. I don't see any Davids here, so let's use a David, okay? It's always better to use a name not on the screen. David has bipolar. Now, it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that people who have a mental illness are less human or less important or lowly. Doesn't say that anywhere in the Torah. God does not say that people who are born with a mental illness or who developed a mental illness are lesser in any way. And if you believe it does, you show me in my book where it says that, because it doesn't.
Mhm.
As we know, unfortunately, although times are slowly changing, but unfortunately, we know that unfortunately there are many people who look down on others who have a mental illness. Okay? Which is unfortunate because, I mean, I would guess there would be nobody here who would mock somebody who has a physical illness. So why would you think, why would you think that it's appropriate to look down upon somebody because God gave them a mental illness? You think they chose it? I doubt they chose it. Now, I happen to have some friends who have bipolar. I do not think less of them. On the contrary, if anything, I look up to them because I can see that they have a struggle in life and I'm impressed with how they are navigating it. So I don't think less of them. Can I tell you that David has bipolar? Well, there's going to be four conditions, but the first two are what do I think about David when I say it? And the second question is what do you, the listener, think when I tell you about David? Do you think less about David now that I told you that information? And if I don't know how you're going to view it, the truth is I'm going to have to make a guess based on the society you come from. And I'm sorry to say that your society has a lot of growing up to do. I think that's fair to say. I think that each one of us lives in a society that still looks down on people who struggle with mental illness as a whole. I don't mean that every individual looks down upon them, but would you agree with that?
Mhm.
Society still has a tremendous amount of development and growth in this area. Yeah. And therefore, I cannot make an assumption that you're going to take this well. And therefore, unless I know, and perhaps we've had a conversation about it before, perhaps I know that you don't look down on people with bipolar. Well, then the first two conditions are number one, I don't think badly about David because he's got bipolar. And you don't either. So I can tell you. But there's two more conditions which we're going to get to. But I want to. Okay, so let's take it a step further now. What are the other two conditions? Well, one of them you're probably already sensing. The third condition is actually a word that, if you look in the dictionary, you will see it there. It's a word called secret or privacy. According to Jewish law, and I think you'll not just hear it from me, but you'll feel it. According to Jewish law, you are not allowed to share somebody else's secret unless there are safety issues. In Hebrew, for those of you who have a little bit of Hebrew, it's called megale sod, to reveal a secret. Now, although the word exists in English, the word secret exists in English, practically nowadays it hardly exists. I mean, if you have one person tell their friend, "Oh, I've got to tell you something, but don't tell anybody," what does the friend hear? Law, if somebody tells you something in confidence, either because they told you not to repeat it, or it's the type of thing that people generally want kept secret, you are not allowed to reveal it to anybody unless you get their permission. And perhaps this is shocking to you, even to your spouse. People tell me things, especially in my educational role. I have people telling me things about themselves. I am not allowed to reveal those things to my spouse without their direct permission. Now, sometimes I value my wife's opinion, and I will ask them, "Do you mind if I discuss this with my wife?" If they say yes, and well, that's great. If they say they don't mind, then that's great. If they say they do mind, I may still discuss it with my wife, but I'll change enough details so that she's got no idea who I'm speaking about, and then I'm still keeping a secret because I haven't revealed anything about anybody. It's more of a conceptual idea. But this is a very, very, very important Jewish law. You're not allowed to reveal a secret about somebody that they do not want to be revealed unless there are safety issues. Safety includes many, many things. We're going to talk about that in the next class. Okay. So let's go back to my example of David. Now, it could be that I don't think badly about David that he has bipolar, and it could be that none of you will either. But one second, does David want this information known? I have to ask David. I can't just reveal something about David without David's permission, not something like that. So I've got no right to tell you that David has bipolar unless I have his permission. I have no right to tell you that somebody's getting divorced unless they are comfortable with that information being public. It's not my place. I'll explain to you, I'll tell you what the Hebrew is, I'll translate it, and then we'll try and define what it means. The fourth condition is that the listener needs to be something called a chacham tsanua. Chacham, that's one of those annoying words with the deep guttural ch, which the Dutch will have no problem with, but the Anglos will find harder. Yeah? Unless you're a Scottish Anglo. The listener needs to be something called a chacham tsanua. Chacham literally means wise. And sanua is a very interesting word, which is extremely difficult to translate. For the moment, I'm going to translate it as modest. Okay? The listener needs to be a wise and modest person. Now, what does wise mean in this context? Well, our sages give two definitions of a wise person. The first definition, you may have heard of, is a wise person is somebody who learns from everybody. This, by the way, is often the opposite of a wise person, of the way society views a wise person. Society views a wise person as, oh, well, he knows everything. He doesn't need to learn from anybody. Okay? He's the professor and everybody has to listen to him. However, our definition of a wise person is somebody who is wise enough to understand that there's not a single person in this world who cannot teach him something. Whatever their job is, whether it's the lowest job of the low, or whether they've got a really, really small IQ, it doesn't matter. Everybody was created in the image of God. Everybody has a spark of holiness to them. Every single person, by the way, this has got nothing to do with Jewish or not Jewish, right? We are all descendants of Adam. Everybody has a spark of holiness, and we are all created in the image of God, and therefore we have something to learn from every single person we meet. That's one definition of a wise person, somebody who learns from everybody. The other definition is somebody who can, in Hebrew, ro'eh et hanolad, see what will be born, meaning somebody who understands the repercussions of their actions. That's why a chess player is normally a very wise person, because to be a top chess player, you need to think many moves in advance. If I do this, then they could do this or this or this. And if they do this, then I could do this. And they can think many moves ahead. That's a wise person, somebody who understands that their actions do not take place in a vacuum. But if I do something, it could lead to something. And then they think about that and they make sensible decisions based on that wider understanding of how things work in the world. So we're going to use that definition of a wise person, somebody who understands the repercussions of their actions. What is this word tsanua, the other thing that we need the listener to be? As I said, I translated it as modest. It's one of the most difficult concepts in Judaism to translate accurately. But probably the best way I could explain it is like this. Somebody who is tsanua is somebody who has enough understanding of their own self-worth, so they do not need to broadcast to get attention from others, so that then, after receiving that external validation, they start to feel good about themselves. Meaning, this concept of tsanua, of being tsanua, or you may have heard it in the term of the concept as a noun, which would be tsniut. Okay? This concept of tsniut, or modesty, or being tsanua, means I have enough self-esteem, or I have enough understanding of my own intrinsic worth as a divinely created creature by a God who doesn't make mistakes, who has created me for my own specific, unique, divine purpose in this world. I'm enough in touch with that, and I feel good enough about myself that I do not need to spend my time broadcasting in whatever way broadcasting happens to be to try and get your attention. So you can say, wow, Rabbi Salasnik, you're so unbelievable. And then when you say that to me, then I start to feel good about myself. I don't need that. Do you understand? Somebody who is tsanua doesn't need the external validation, which means that they're not enslaved to it. Do you know how many people nowadays are enslaved to external validation, to external attention, meaning that they don't actually feel good about themselves until other people are telling them that they're either pretty, beautiful, doing well, special, whatever it happens to be? It is the disease of our generation. It's a very, very, very painful thing that society goes through. And if you don't believe me, just look at social media. Now, I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook, which is the social media for old people like me. I haven't taken the step into Instagram, and I have no intention of doing so. I waste enough time on Facebook already. But the concept of social media where I need to tell the world what's going on so that then they can all like me. And then I start feeling good about myself because somebody liked my post. That is unfortunately a terrible sign of a tremendous lack of internal self-worth. Now, we probably all of us suffer somewhat from a lack of self-esteem. It is the disease of our generation. Why? Perhaps Hollywood and Photoshop and magazines, and it could be any of those sorts of things. But somebody who is tsanua is somebody who has enough sense of self-worth that they do not need to use whatever they have at their in their hands to try and get attention. Now, it could be looks, it could be the way a person dresses, but it could also be the way a person shows off about their achievements in public. And it could also be, you probably know people like this. You know that person who's always got the latest stories, and they go, oh, come, and the people gather around them. When you see that, don't be angry with that person. You should actually feel sorry for them because they're very, very needy and they are enslaved. I apologize if this is too close to home for some people. In fact, I think it's one of the biggest drives why people speak badly about others. It's always easier to push somebody else down than to pull yourself up. Yeah. But there are certain types of people who just cannot hold information. You tell them some information and they are like a leaky sieve, right? Or sieve, however you pronounce that word. Yeah. Why? Because anything you tell them, they have to use it. They have to use it to get attention. So here's the thing, okay? Condition number one is I need the speaker to not think badly about what I'm saying, meaning me, the speaker, mustn't feel. Number two, the listener mustn't think less of the person. Number three, it can't be a secret. But number four, if the listener is not wise enough to understand that if they spread this information, it could actually cause harm. It may not be derogatory, but it could end up meaning that David will lose his job or may not be able to get a job when they find out that he has bipolar. It could cause him emotional suffering. It may not be a secret. It doesn't mean that he wants everybody on the street to be talking about it. And when he finds out that everybody's talking about his bipolar, that's going to cause him emotional suffering. So it may not be derogatory, but if this person isn't wise enough to understand the repercussions of their actions, nor do they have enough sense of self that they're capable of holding information in, and they are like a leaky sieve and everything has to come out to get attention, then that information is going to spread and going to cause harm. And therefore, it's not good enough for the speaker and the listener to not view this person less, nor is it not good enough for it not to be a secret. It's got to be that I've got to ensure that when I'm handing over this grenade, let's call it a grenade, this grenade, I'm not handing it over to somebody who's got no idea that you're not supposed to pull out the pin and chuck it, because that's going to cause a lot of harm. Now, I want to give an example that the Talmud gives us. And the reason why I want to give this example is it's a perfect example, but it's also actually an example of some people who converted into the Jewish religion. This is a very, very famous story. You may have heard of somebody called, I'll end on this point and then I'll take any questions. You may have heard of somebody called Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. If any of you have been to Israel and you've been to his grave site in a place called Meron, there is an annual pilgrimage there on a particular day of the year, and called Lag BaOmer. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was the story goes that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who lived at the times of Roman domination of Jerusalem, had to hide from the Romans because they wanted to kill him. Why did they want to kill him? Well, basically, in the yeshiva, the Talmudic academy, where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and some other rabbis were the leaders, one day, one of the rabbis, a rabbi called Rabbi Yehuda, said, we have to show a tremendous amount of gratitude to the Romans because they built bathhouses so we can be clean. They've built, if any of you have ever seen the beginning of Monty Python, which one is it? One of the Monty Python movies. They actually, there's a beginning that sounds like, what have the Romans actually done for us? And I'm just wondering if the people who wrote the Monty Python movie actually studied this piece of Talmud, because you actually hear Rabbi Yehuda saying, oh, they did this for us. They built bridges across the rivers. They built good roads. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, what are you talking about, Rabbi Yehuda? They hate us, the Romans. They only did it for their own ego. Now, there happened to be a student there whose name was Yehuda ben Gerim. Now, Gerim is the Hebrew term for a convert. This Yehuda was the child of two people who had converted. Now, if you converted at the time of Jewish persecution, that meant you were a very, very special person. Okay, let's not beat about the bush. It's not like it's perhaps it's like nowadays, people who convert despite the Jews being hated across the world. Yeah, do you know? I don't know if it was like that, but it must have been a very, very difficult time to convert. So his parents must have been extremely special people to have taken that step. And they'd sent their son Yehuda to the top Talmudic academy, the top university for Jewish study. This Yehuda, he heard what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said. He came home at the end of the day. And his parents said, oh, Yehuda, what did you learn today? And he told them what he learned. And that was fine. The problem was that although Yehuda's parents were very, very special people, they lacked this sensitivity that we've been talking about, this chacham tzanua. They lacked this sensitivity. Perhaps they needed validation. Perhaps it was difficult for them. They felt that they were never sort of fully included in the community. I don't know what it was, but they felt the need for validation. And one day they were walking along and they met one of their old friends before they became Jewish. And their friend said to them, oh, how you doing? I heard you're Judah. That's the English translation of Yehuda. I heard your Judah is going to that Talmudic academy. What does he learn there? So the parent said, oh, yeah, he learned this. This is what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said yesterday in the yeshiva. Now, they didn't mean it badly. Yehuda definitely didn't mean it badly when he told his parents. It definitely wasn't a secret. It was said in front of the whole yeshiva, hundreds of students. And yet, because they were not chachamim tznuim, they were not perhaps intelligent enough to realize that this could cause harm. Or perhaps they didn't have the ability to hold it in because they needed that external validation. That information got spread until it came to the Roman governor. And when the Roman governor said, if this is what this Rabbi Shimon is saying about us, he's saying that we only do it for our own ego and we hate them, off with his head, we'll go and kill him. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had to spend 13 years hiding in a cave. In fact, the Talmud tells us all sorts of miracles that happened to him in order to stay alive. So When Yehuda told his parents, he didn't think badly about Rabbi Shimon. And when his parents heard it, they didn't think badly about Rabbi Shimon. And it wasn't a secret. So all of those first three conditions were fulfilled, but they were not capable of holding that in and being sensible enough to realize that if I share this with a member of the Roman community, and then it gets to the Roman governor, that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is going to be in real danger. So that essentially is a perfect example of how you see those four conditions. They had the first three, but they didn't have the fourth one. So in very, very, very quick summary, there are certain things you can't say about somebody because God says it's bad. You cannot call somebody something. You cannot say that somebody steals unless there is a constructive purpose. For no purpose, you can't say that somebody steals because God has already defined stealing as bad. But there are many, many, many things that the Torah does not define as bad. The Torah does not say it's bad to be pretty or ugly or rich or poor or clever or not clever. The Torah does not define anything about that. In fact, most people didn't have a choice about it. It's godly it's godly decided, divinely decided. And therefore, for all of these things, it really depends. It's subjective. How does the speaker think about it? How will the listener see it? Is it a secret? And is the listener somebody who has enough wisdom to realize that this could cause harm if it spreads, and enough ability to hold it in rather than using information like this to get acceptance or attention, as many of us struggle in that sort of area. So I've finished speaking for today. What I've tried to do is to give you an insight as to how the Jewish legal system, the Jewish law, the halacha, defines a derogatory comment, to give you some sort of insight. If you can tick all of those boxes, there's no reason why you can't say something about somebody else. You don't mean it badly. It's not going to be heard badly. It's not a secret. And you've chosen somebody who's sensible enough, so it's not going to spread and therefore cause harm. So then you're fine. But I agree with what Matthew said at the beginning or in the middle, that there are many issues here, that any of these sorts of things that could be viewed as bad in society, you'd be better to stay away from, because the chances of you being able to fulfill all four of these conditions are very small.